What's going on, guys? Today we're doing a mobile mechanic ride along. I know it's been a while and I know you guys enjoy these videos, so I'm going to go ahead and do one today. Stay tuned. But first, I wanted to announce we've got some Andy's Auto merch now. We got a hat, a shirt, a sticker, a coffee mug, and even a hoodie. You can find these items listed below the video, or you can go to my channel page and you can find them under the store section. If you're interested in supporting the channel while also getting some pretty cool gear for yourself, go ahead and check those out. Now back to the video. Alright guys, here we are, job number 1, doing a starter. Let's get it. Well, it doesn't look like it needs a starter. We got her started up with a jump start. That battery looks kind of old though. Charging system's working too. That one I just told the customer his battery was low. Maybe something got left on. I'm not really too sure what's going on with it, but we just charged for an inspection. We confirmed the starter was indeed working properly. The charging system was working good. The battery's not that old, so I don't necessarily think there's any actual issues with that vehicle. I just think the battery was low for whatever reason. If he does have any further issues, we may want to look into a parasitic draw test, but as of right now, it seemed like it's just a little too low to start the vehicle. Sometimes that can happen for a variety of different reasons, but not too bad on that one. Moving on to the next one. Right, on this one, we're supposed to replace the alternator on this Buick LaCrosse. Alright, so first things first, went ahead and disconnected the metal brace that went across here, as well as disconnecting the battery. Now I'm going to take those two nuts out of the fuse box so I can move that out of the way and access the tensioner. Alright guys, so on this V8, the tensioner is way down there. Not this pulley here, but the one down below it, a little to the left, is the actual tensioner pulley. And there's a special tool that's like a thin belt tool that's supposed to go up in there according to Mitchell, but I could not figure out any way of getting access to it. There's supposed to be a 3/8 square hole that you can get into, but as you can see, even with moving this out of the way, that's nearly impossible to see what's going on down there. And then down here, this is all I can see, but I want to give a shout out to a guy by the name of Alan Guzzo Sr. on YouTube, because I found one of his videos and he helped me out quite a bit. He says all you have to do is stick a pry bar between the chassis and the top part of this spring and just pry on it, and that will compress the spring and therefore move the tensioner. So thank you to Alan Guzzo Sr. on YouTube for showing me that video, or having that out there for me to view rather, because that saved me a lot of stress. I was really starting to wonder how I was going to get that off. But now that we got the belt off, we can start taking off the alternator. Alright guys, we're all finished up with that one. We did get the alternator installed successfully. The charging system was working properly. Unfortunately, I couldn't film nearly as much of that as I'd like to, because it was one of those customers that just wanted to stand around the whole time and talk to you, and it's really difficult to try to film a video and work on a car and have a conversation with a customer, and you don't really want to be rude and tell them to go away so you can film, you know what I mean? So I do apologize, I wasn't able to film as much of that as I would like, but at least you got the gist of it. We did get the alternator installed, everything's good to go. So I think the next appointment we have is an inspection, so we're headed there now to see what's going on with it. This is another common part of the mobile mechanic workday, visiting the good old Quick Trip. Getting gas is almost a daily thing here. Got me a frappe to cool off. And we're heading to see why this car won't shift out of park, or it's stuck in drive or something like that. Not really sure, but we're heading straight there after this, so stay tuned. Alright, here we are at the Toyota Go ahead and check it out, see what's going on here. Went ahead and turned the key to the on position and put my foot on the brake and tried to move the shifter, and everything seems pretty normal there. Customer thinks they may have broken a shifter cable, but I mean, looking down here, does not seem like that's the case, at least not under the hood, so we'll have to do some further investigation. Alright guys, so if I didn't know anything else about this vehicle, it would seem as if the only issue is that it doesn't start. Customer says it doesn't shift gears or whatever, but as you just saw in that little clip, it seems to be shifting just fine. But for whatever reason, the car will not start. So first thing I'm going to do is hook up the top down and try to see what gear the transmission is in according to the computer. We know that the desired gear is park, but I'm going to try to look in here and see if I can figure out what gear it's actually in. Alright guys, so I got everything related to the transmission that I could find. I selected all the gears. We got low, reverse, drive, third, second. There's not one for park or neutral. I even pulled up the fluid temperature, which is pretty much the same temperature as it is outside right now. But if you look where it says reverse at the bottom, I shift to reverse. Okay, it says off. And then next one is low. Switch to low. Still says off. We'll switch to drive. Drive still says off. 3, nothing. Okay, second, nothing. So what that tells me is that the transmission itself is not actually shifting, even though it is mechanically being told to do so. So it's either stuck in park, stuck in neutral, or there's an electrical issue or some kind of internal transmission damage, because the cable itself is definitely working. We can see that from both ends, up here and in there. But whatever gear you put it into is not being registered by the computer. So we'll have to do a little more research. Well guys, we did a few tests and determined there's a couple wires that goes to that connector right there. A couple of them are supposed to have power and only one of them does. And I've checked the other ones. There's other wires that are supposed to have battery power when they're in certain gears, reverse, you know, 1, 2, 3, etc. And I'm not getting a voltage on any of them in the proper gear, and I'm also not getting power to the switch from both wires. However, when I follow the wiring diagram, it takes me to a fuse in there, and the fuse is hot like it's supposed to be on both sides. The fuse is good. So I think there's a wiring issue between this switch and the fuse. And I also think there may potentially be even bigger issues than that, because the customer said that he thinks he may have put it in park while the vehicle was still moving. But from what I can see, of course I can't see inside the transmission, but it doesn't look like there's any obvious mechanical breakage or damage like that. So that's why I started going into that transmission range sensor. Alright guys, I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that. So when I arrived, the inspection was supposed to be for a car will not shift. But when I got there, it actually wouldn't start. Customer said that he thinks he may have shifted it into park while it was still moving. So that's when we started checking the shifter cable, because that's what the customer thought was wrong with it, and he said he thought that it may have broke. So anyway, we realized that that was working fine. Then I checked the battery just to be sure, because it kind of seemed like the only issue was that it wouldn't start. The lights would come on and everything, but it just simply would not start. So that's when I checked the battery. Battery was good. Now I could have gone ahead and checked the starter, but the main reason I was there is because the customer seemed to think he had a transmission issue. So once I realized that the cable was good, I started wanting to check into that range sensor. On the procedure for checking that, on the connector, there's a couple of wires that have, or that are supposed to have power going to them in the on position or in the run position. One of them did, the other one did not. And then there's a wire for each gear. You put your multimeter on the negative post of the battery, and then the other cable you back probe to the connector. For each gear, there's a specific wire. So let's say reverse, you go to that wire. I believe the reverse one was actually red and black. So I back probed it, meaning that it's still plugged in, and you're checking it from the back side of the connector where the wire goes into the connector. You put it into reverse, and it says you should have battery voltage, which was 12.6, 12.7 roughly. So I did that for every gear, and I did not get any power. And then the one wire, it was red and blue, that was supposed to have power with the key in the on position. It did not have power. And it says that power is supposed to come from a specific fuse on the left side of the dash. So I took the fuse box cover off. It says that the fuse was labeled as gauge 2. So I pulled that fuse out. The fuse seemed to be good. I put my multimeter inside of the cavity where the fuse goes. On one side there was of course nothing. On the other side there was 12 volts. So with the fuse in there, again, I checked the bottom side of the fuse because I got the 12 volts from the top, and I still got 12 volts at the bottom of the fuse, indicating that the voltage is traveling through the fuse into the red and blue wire. That red and blue wire is supposed to go to the transmission range sensor. However, there could be a splice somewhere. The wiring diagram did not show that. I'm just throwing stuff out there. Usually that's on the wiring diagram, but maybe there's a splice somewhere, or maybe there's a rip or something like that. But basically there is no power from the fuse box to the transmission range sensor on that wire where there's supposed to be, and I believe that could have an effect on why there's no voltage at each gear. So from what I can tell, the transmission is confused as to what gear it's in. And so the next step, it probably wouldn't hurt to go ahead and test the starter. If there's no power at the starter solenoid, then chances are it's because of the transmission issue, whatever's going on with that. But if you do have power to the starter S terminal and the B plus terminal, then it may just be a starter, and the customer's request of Diagnostic kind of threw me for a loop. But I did notice that issue there, that there wasn't power on that red and blue wire when according to the procedure they're supposed to be. So either the procedure is wrong, or we have an electrical issue with that particular wire. Unfortunately, I do not actually trace down wires like that. I think the best thing to actually do would be to try to use a jumper wire versus try to, follow that wire and cut the looms open and everything like that. So instead of doing that, that would probably be the next step. Test the starter just to be certain, and then use a jumper wire on that particular wire just to make sure that the range sensor is working properly. And that's pretty much the end of that. I just wanted to kind of go a little more in depth with that. It was extremely hot earlier. I needed to cool off. I was drenched in sweat, couldn't hardly focus, but I did get that diagnostic done, at least for the most part. Sorry, the first video we didn't actually do the job. Second one we couldn't really film too much of it, but at least at the end we kind of ended on a pretty cool diagnostic job. I know I didn't really film too much of that, but this is not quite like your 2003 Chevy Impala starter replacement video where I go in depth on exactly how to do the job. These mobile mechanic ride-alongs are kind of more just for educational purposes rather than for learning. So I apologize if I don't go into quite as much detail or film quite as much of the job on these ride-alongs as I am filming multiple jobs in one day. Otherwise, hope you guys were entertained. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you're interested in seeing more videos like that, please subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and like and leave a comment below. And otherwise, I will see you next time.